Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Tuesday. I believe it's Tuesday if my calendar is telling me correctly. I am Claire Jones, and I am an author and small publisher committed to creating a better world through inclusive stories and practices. If you're joining us, please comment, like, share below. We are jumping on for my Authorvision Facebook Live series where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the personal visions that have shaped our lives and careers. So today I'm talking to Nikki. So glad to have
Hello.
you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
And I believe we met at Geek Girl Con,
We
yes?
did. Yes, we met at Geek Girl Con.
Man, that feels like ages ago.
It really does.
Because you are like a avid conference goer. Like you literally just got back from one. Like how many do you go to in a year?
Well, to be honest, I'm just getting back into it. Geek Girl Con was my first con back since the pandemic.
Mm,
I used to go to quite a few, but I did Geek Girl Con, I did Odd Mall, and then I did Norwest Con just last weekend. So yeah, just kind of dipping my foot back in and going to more of them because it's super fun to get to meet people in person and talk about books and
mm,
just network and all
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, it is definitely a whole nother environment compared to online. I feel like we've all gotten so used to online spaces and now we're like, all right, in person, let's do it.
Yeah, it's a little more exhausting in person though, I gotta tell you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I am drained for days afterwards.
hmm hmm
Well, let's get into it. Tell us your backstory. How did you get to this world of books and cons and extroverting?
um I actually think I have to blame my mom um because she was always a voracious reader, and I remember her reading books to us when we were little and making sound effects for us,
Mm,
and I just never stopped reading after that. And I was reading her Stephen King books in grade school and just going into the dark end.
yeah.
But that kind of just kicked off this love of books for me. And then some of the worst points in my life when I was struggling with various things that we all struggle with, but
Yeah.
especially the teenage years and all of that fun. It was books that really got me through most of that stuff, and I got really into reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction, and that escape was what helped me deal with my daily life. And it's also what inspired me to start writing,
Mm,
which I started doing when I was 11. I told my sixth grade teacher I was going to be an author when I grew up.
amazing. Love
so
it.
so yeah, that was kind of where it all started. And I read this book called Birth of the Firebringer by Meredith Ann Pierce, and I just loved the story and the creativity so much that I wanted to do my own. And so I started writing my own, and it's still in a briefcase upstairs, and it's god awful, but but it's there to remind me of where it all started. So that's kind of how I ended up here, and I just never quit, and now I write more and more all the time.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I understand that. I kind of have my mother to blame as well. Like my dad is an avid book nerd as well. Like he goes through books like potato chips. But I really relate to what you said, where like books are always there for us. Like whenever my mom had a problem in her life, she was like, to the bookstore.
nice, I like it.
Like there's always a book out there that will help you through whatever you're going
Yeah,
through.
yeah, and I love the idea that one day someone might pick up one of my books to help them through a moment like that, and that to me makes it all worthwhile. Just that chance that it could help someone escape when they need to and get through something harder. I love that idea.
Hmm. So how many years has it been since you've been writing?
Too many. Since the dawn of time.
Mm,
I actually got I kind of dropped my writing. Well, I never stopped writing really, but I kind of put it as a side hobby because that's what everybody convinced me to treat it as for a
yeah.
while. And then in 2014, or it was actually 2012, I was laid off from my job, and I decided to try taking it a little more seriously for a while. And I actually did get a literary agent, and I got a traditional publisher. And this is a cautionary tale because I got the wrong traditional publisher. Nothing wrong with them personally, but it was a bad match because what they wanted to publish and what I wanted to write were not the same thing. They were more romance focused and stuff, and I don't mind romance, but that's not what I really wanted to write. I had one book that kind of fit their niche that they picked up, and then after that, it was a little bit of like, this isn't what we're looking for. You're not what I'm looking for either. So we split ways, and I bought the rights to the first book back and decided to try self-publishing. But it's been a journey. It really has. But I've got 14 books now, and number 15 is coming out on the 13th. So.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's that 10 book mark that we're all kind of like striving towards, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then you have to change the goal, because if you hit the 10 books, you got to go to 20 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just never stops.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So what kept you going along this way? What was that vision that was driving you forward?
To some degree, I mean, there's a certain amount of it that's just, I don't feel like myself if I'm not writing something. I mean, even if I wasn't publishing, I don't think I'd ever stop writing, because one, I'm a terrible person to live with when I'm not writing. I am grumpy and just terrible. No one wants to be there. So I just feel like I'm not myself if I'm not writing. But I mean, there are definitely those times where when you're trying to figure out marketing or get through a little block in a work or something like that, that you wonder why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But it always kind of comes back around to the fact that I'm not happy if I'm not doing it. So I keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, writing can be such a dopamine hit, right?
It really can. I mean, you get one of those scenes where you're writing and crying at the same time because it's it's a big emotional moment, and I have to type while I talk. Sorry about that. And it just feels so good to get that emotion and feel like it's really coming out onto the page, and I love that. Yeah.
I know. It's funny when I hear people complain about the editing process, because like yes, I don't want to sit down and edit, but when I do actually sit down and read my work back, I'm like, man, this is so good.
Isn't that great? I love that. I mean, and every time I'm gonna do an edit, I'm like, do I really have to read this thing again? And then I'll start working on it. I'll be like, I can't believe I wrote that. That's great. It's a good feeling.
Yeah. I get to those sentences, I'm like, man, the sentence is gold.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, but I do drag my feet as well. I'm like, man, I have to sit down, I have to edit. Why do I have to read this for like the 10th time? And I'm 2 chapters in and I don't even notice.
Yeah. And I think it's great when it works that way. I mean, for one thing, I believe to some degree there's a little self-indulgence in writing.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're writing the stuff you really want to read and it's working, then I feel like, yeah, you start editing and it's going to pull you back in because this was the story you wanted. But yeah, it's a good feeling when it works right.
Yeah, when it works right. Let's add that caveat to the end of it. Well, what about lessons? What lessons have you learned?
Oh, so many. I think the biggest lesson I learned was how to take feedback well. I remember the first time I got a really intense critique from someone, and it was a friend of mine who had an English degree and who had done some feedback for teaching and stuff. So he was really good at it. too good perhaps, because I gave him this short story and it came back just torn to pieces. Everything, red lines everywhere and all this stuff and all these commentaries. And I thought he hated it. I really thought he hated it and I was devastated. And so I put it away and I didn't touch it again. And then like a year later, he asked me, he said, "Did you ever publish that story?" I was like, "No, it was terrible." He's like, "No, I really loved that story." And I was like, okay, I need to learn how to read between the lines of these critiques. But yeah, that first really dramatic critique was crushing. And now I've gotten to a point where I feel like getting that feedback is so valuable. I mean, some of it may not be right, and some of it may be perfect to fix what you need, and learning to look at it and kind of separate your emotional side from it, I think is one of the most important lessons you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that first reader, I think, has to be a very trusted individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, they do.
Mm.
And but I actually have my method. I've got this built in. My alpha reader
Mm.
who reads as I write is actually my mom. And
Mm.
she's such an avid reader. She's really good at picking out things that don't work or don't
Mm.
flow right. So I love using her. But the best part is that I know her well enough that if she doesn't say something, I can tell that there's something going on there. It's
Yeah.
those things she leaves out strategically. I'm like, okay, so there's a problem over here. All right,
Mm-hmm.
But it's also kind of fun to have that also very, very first reader be someone you feel really safe with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I use my best friend because she was a lit major in college. So like that's how I
Oh yeah.
rationalize it.
Right? There's always a
But
way.
she's more of a horror reader than a fantasy reader, but there is a lot of overlap between the two
Yeah.
genres. And so like she does have some familiarity with the genres that I'm writing in as well, which I think also helps. But she will also be kind.
Yeah, you got to learn how to translate the stuff they do say and don't say to pick out things that they might not be telling you. But if you know them well enough, you can do that. So it's okay.
And I think the point that you made about your mother being an avid reader, I think that that's just so important, like both from the people that you're getting feedback from, but also ourselves as
Yeah.
writers, because there's this like skill set that I think that is integral to writing that a lot of people, it's an amorphous skill set because you can't really describe it that much of like how to structure a story, how to structure a book. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a science,
Yeah, but
it's
you
an
can learn it by,
art.
yeah. And you're right there, that reading aspect. I always tell newer writers who want advice, two of the most important things are read a lot. Just read tons, because you'll learn so much from doing that. And write a lot. And don't expect the first thing you write to be really good, because it's not.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, and I've run into a few writers who were like, "I wrote this thing, it was terrible." I was like, "Is it your first draft?" Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it sucks. They
yeah,
all do.
yeah. It's funny when I listen to people trying to like analyze book structures and give like a formula to book
Yeah.
structures, because it's like, yes, but there's so many books, so many great books that break that formula.
Oh
And
yeah.
so you can't really say like if you write it this way, it will be a great book, right?
Yes. Actually, that's another one of those things, because I tell people, if you're going to do this, go ahead and ask for advice, but recognize that you're going to get 20 different pieces of advice from 20 different authors, and you're going to have to sort through it and find what's going to work for you, because it's all different and it really is an art. So
Yeah.
there's not one right way to make it all work. And I mean, there are definitely wrong ways to do it,
Yeah.
but and I actually did some beta reading for a while, and every now and then you get one where it's like, okay, you need to go back to some of the basics here. And when you've got that, we can work on the other stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting process.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost like a sixth sense that you have to develop
Yeah,
because you can sense where there are holes or room for improvement.
yeah,
But there's also the art of intentional holes within stories as
yeah,
well. And so you have to have the sixth sense to be like, is this an intentional flaw in the story?
yeah.
Or is this a flaw that needs to be fixed in order for the story to come across better?
Right, right. Yeah, it really is a complicated process. And I mean, when you've been doing it long enough, you start not noticing that stuff as much. But then, and that's one of the great things about like talking to newer authors and stuff. When you've been doing it for a while, I think you start kind of losing sight of some of the details
Yes.
that make it all work. So if you keep engaging with other authors, then they can bring you back to that point
Yeah.
and help you see it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a tool and a tip. So do you have any other tools or tips for our audience to help us stay sane through this process?
um, the other thing, I think one of the hard things about writing is finding people to support you. It can be
Yes.
incredibly lonely. I mean, one of the things, actually, it's one of the things I love about doing indie is that I work directly with my editor and directly with my artist, and I have this community of people that I actually interact with now, and now beta readers and ARC readers. But I think building a little bit of a community, if you don't have someone in your family who's really supportive, reach out and find other writers who are supportive or things like that, because it can be a lonely and emotionally stressful process. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to have some kind of support group to keep you going and keep you sane.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you said at the beginning, there's so many people out there that want you to classify it as a side
Yeah,
hobby, like
set
a
it aside.
secondary thing in your life when we also need people to be like, now there's something here.
Yeah, yeah, and you need people who can encourage you in that direction, especially. I mean, I know so many people who are like me, and maybe you're one of them too, but where that writing thing is just an integral part of who you are. It's not something you do, it's who you are. And I think not having support for that can be pretty rough. So
Hmm.
finding people who do understand that is very important.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been a creative my entire life. My mom was an art teacher for 25 years. And so most of my creative expression over the majority of my life have been visual art oriented, just
Oh,
because
cool.
that's what was role modeled for me as a child. And so no one really pointed to my writing abilities and was like, this is also something that you're very good at because it kind of underlined all my other skill sets as well. Like it made me a good communicator, it made me good in school,
Right,
all of these
right.
things. But then when I actually sat down to write like really hardcore write fiction, the creative flow that I experienced was nothing like I'd
Hmm.
ever experienced before. And I was like, why haven't I tried this sooner?
You found your place.
I was honestly so mad for a little bit because I was like, man, I was just funneling it into the wrong direction.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But it is great when you find that. Um, and I think in some ways, I consider myself really lucky that I found that passion and it was my passion so young. But then I also, let people push me away from it for a lot of years. So kind of it didn't go so great in that respect. But I found my way back. So, and I'm where I'm happy now. So,
I mean, 14 books, I would hope so.
yes, yes, yeah. I love this process so much.
Yeah. So how many
Other than the
hours do you
marketing,
spend a week writing if you're at 14?
um, it really depends. I will confess that I was unemployed briefly again last year, and so in 5 months I wrote my new series, which is 4 books,
Oh, wow.
and so ever since then I've been working on the editing and the polishing and getting the cover art and all that stuff and getting them released. And the first one came out in January. But yeah, when I have like a full day to write, I can do so much.
Yeah.
But right now I'm back to working full time, so I usually try to get in like an hour a day at least. And then I work on the weekends too. If I can get my patient partner to leave me alone, I will write anywhere from 2 to 6 hours on a weekend. So
Yeah, I can't do the small chunks every day. I have to do big chunks when I do
yeah.
sit down to write. So Sundays are my writing days.
Oh, nice.
I pretty much do like 5-ish hours every Sunday, and that's just my routine. Like I could never do the small chunks because it's not enough time for me to I gotta sink into the vibes.
I've actually found that lately, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I would never really get out of the vibe right now. So I'm pretty much every second I'm like jotting notes in my journal and
Lucky you.
cooking dinner, and I don't. It's an obsession right now. So I don't know how long that will last, but I'm kind of enjoying it, if I were to be honest.
I've been there. To be fair, with my first book, like when I first discovered the flow, I was addicted to the flow for like
Yeah.
a good
Oh
long
yeah.
while.
Yeah, and I have a ankle I have to have surgery on, so I can't go do much. And so my writing is the way I'm coping with that right now.
I understand that for sure.
So yeah, my ankle is my nemesis, but also my excuse for doing a lot of writing.
Yeah. I knew I was onto something when I could write through a cold.
Yes, yes. You got the head fog, but it's going anyway.
Yeah, I was like, I'm still enjoying myself. Like I kept like doing a check-in and be like, am I stressing myself out by like continuing to write while I feel bad? And I was like, I feel good. This is good.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm waiting to see how I do when I'm recovering from surgery. I'm like, I won't be able to work those days. So if I can get in a flow, I could get a lot of writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see how the pain is. We'll try it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time. Anything you want to add before we start wrapping up?
Well, there's probably like a million things, but then you asked and they all went away. Blank. No, I'm just hoping that this continues to last, and I'm really grateful that I got to come talk to you today. And you know, am I allowed to share my webpage?
Absolutely, yeah.
My books are all on elysiumpalace.com, and it's a long story how that happened. It's actually got to do with one of the books, but that's the name. And I do have the next newest book coming out on April 13th, and I'm really super excited. So
that's awesome.
But thank you again for letting me come on here.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, these always feel like mini therapy sessions as well because we get into it. We get into it. So this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts, feelings, insights, stories with us as well. We'd love to know how visions like these have shaped you in your own lives. Like just that need to express is so real.
So real. Very much.
Yeah. Well, special thanks to Nikki for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again.
Yeah. So please comment, like, subscribe below. Check out Linktree/Claire Joins for all of my links. And then I'll make sure that your links are in the description as well so that people can access them easily. And until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, guys.